But we're joined now by Audacy NFL insider Mark Schlereth, host of the Stink and Truth podcast. Insider Calls brought to you by Hellman's Real Mayonnaise. May your game day be delicious. And good evening, Mark. How the heck are you?
I'm doing great, man. How are you guys?
Doing wonderful.
Hey, Stink, how does a team go from the second overall seed one year in the NFC to a team that might be looking at a top 5 pick?
Yeah, I mean, it is obviously you just don't play well.
Sure.
But it's, it's more than that. I mean, it's the lack of attention to detail, lack of replacing players that leave, lack of understanding which players are diminishing, who you're counting on. And then ultimately, it's, the organizational aspect of the thing I always complain about with the Dallas Cowboys is, like, who's in charge? Who you afraid of? All those things. Who's holding players accountable? You watch, and I heard Jerry Jones' sound after last night's game. Effort's not an issue. I can show you 6-7 plays where effort's a huge issue, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah. And I'm not even digging for him. I'm just watching the game going, Lord have mercy. We can sit there and we can talk about all those different things, but eventually it just accumulates. Eventually you go from being a decent team to being horrible. And some of that is, the coaches on your staff and, all those different things, not addressing some serious issues, and we've talked about a bunch with the running game and some of the other things that have gone on. And so it's all those things. All those things weigh you down and accumulate and end up creating a team that's just not very good.
Is that why a lame duck coach can be tricky and most teams avoid it?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think that's a huge part of it. And ultimately, like I've always said, the issue in Dallas is you don't empower the guy. Like I always talk about this. I probably talked about this with you guys. Is there's a certain there's two types of fear. There's the fear, like biblical fear, that's awesome respect and reverence, and then there's fear like that dude will cut my ass. That dude's in charge, and it's not my owner that's in charge. And if you don't have that within your organization, the New Orleans Saints, it was interesting. I was doing a game a couple of years ago with the New Orleans Saints, and a longtime Saints assistant, a guy that's been around that facility for forever, walked up to me and goes, what the problem is? Sean Payton left this organization and the fear walked out the building with him.
Sure.
Because there's no fear from a coaching staff and there's no fear from our players. And we suck because of it. And I completely concur. I completely agree with that opinion. Like, there's got to be, hey, listen, man, we got to play hard for one another. We got to do all those things. But somebody's got to be in charge, and somebody's got to fire your ass if you're not playing well.
Mark Schlereth here with you, brought to you by Hellman's Real Mayonnaise. You can purchase Hellman's at your local Walmart, Kroger, or grocery store to add extra deliciousness and creamy flavor to your game day dishes this football season. Stink, how long to rebuild? Once you're like, wow, we're one of the worst 5 teams in the league, can you restock it in one off season? Is this a 3-year process? What do you say?
Well, I mean, look at the Denver Broncos right now, and I know they're 6-5 right now, but they're doing that with a rookie quarterback. And it was so interesting because everybody sat here at the beginning of the year. They had this list of the worst rosters in football, and a bunch of lists from a bunch of different networks like CBS and this, that, and the other. And like the Carolina Panthers, they listed as a better roster than the Denver Broncos.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you guys are high. And, it's funny because I was on television and we sat there and, we brought this up and the over-under was 5.5. And I sat on national television. If you don't pound this over, you're an idiot. Like, they're going to win more than 5.5 games. And, they've got no talent. No, they just don't have talent that you know about. They don't have name value talent. And, ultimately, defensively, they're one of the top teams in the league. And offensively right now, with a young quarterback, with a rookie quarterback, they're playing pretty good football right now. But the bottom line is, in today's NFL, you can flip it pretty quick, but you got to flip it in the draft. You got to get great draft picks. And then I think the other thing is, you can't be a first-day participant in free agency because you pay A-plus money for B-minus players. You got to be a second-day gap filler. Like, you can't go over and get the biggest names in free agency that the teams that know them best decided they didn't want them anymore. That's an issue. And so you got to be judicious in the way you approach free agency. And I think you can plug holes and you can create, a spot starter here or there and some great rotational depth. But you've got to actually build this thing from the draft, and you've got to be spot on, and you got to nail it in the draft. And so I think those are the two things that you can do. You can do those things well, and you can overcome a lot of the deficiencies on your team.
Stink, when you've met with some of these coaches and you've done your consulting opportunities with teams, are there some assistant coaches out there? We talk a lot about Ben Johnson and some of these coordinators, but are there some under-the-radar names that you think pretty highly of that you think eventually might be up-and-coming good names to look at for head coaching opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, there's like Nick Rawlis with Arizona. He's incredibly dynamic. He's been coaching under Jonathan Gannon for a while. He's young. He's fun. You mentioned Ben Johnson. That's a guy that you look at, you say, wow, he's a dude that I really like. I love Bobby Slowick in Houston. I think he's done a great job. So there are a lot of those guys, that we can sit there and talk about that have done great jobs with quarterbacks and this, that, and the other. I think one of the things that you have to understand also that the first time you get to go around to be a head coach, usually you're a failure. Like, there are so many things you didn't necessarily think about, or so many things that you never had to deal with. And I think one of the big things is creating an atmosphere where you're in charge of everything and you're coaching the coaches. And I think one of the things that happens to coaches, young coaches who get those jobs, is they hate letting go of play calling duties. They hate letting go of the things that got them there. And ultimately, your job is to put a staff together, and then your job is to coach that coaching staff to make sure you get exactly what you want out of your football team. And I think that's a hard thing to do because most guys don't want to let go of what got them the opportunity. And then there's a lot of guys, to me, that are just not dynamic personalities. You've got to be able to command a room. You've got to be able to command a press conference. You've got to be able to command a room of football players, and then you've got to be authentic. You can't be the guy that you just coached for. Ben Johnson can't pretend to be Dan Campbell because players may not be, hey, listen, man, I'm a former player. We're not the most intelligent group out there, but we all have good horse sense. And when you're fake, instantly, players will realize that instantly, and then all of a sudden you get tuned out.
Hey, Stink, when you mentioned these coaches and stuff, and I know being a former offensive lineman, maybe this will rank really high on your list, but where do you put the importance of the offensive line coach on the staff? And everybody talks about the coordinators and stuff. Me personally, if I'm interviewing you and you tell me you're offensive line coach and I can't vet that guy or know him or see some of his work, I don't think I'm going to hire you because I think that line coach is a really, really important position.
I think it's the most important position on a football team.
Gotcha.
One, you have the biggest group. You have the biggest positional group. You got 5 starters. You've got you got essentially 5 backups, and then practice squad guys. So
Sure.
you got probably the biggest room. DBs are another one, but you got 4 starting DBs, a lot of 5 if you're playing nickel or whatever. But ultimately, it's the biggest room, and it's the backbone of a team. And to correctly build a team, like I just laughed when everybody thought Chicago was going to win everything, right? Oh, the rookie quarterback who's the most dynamic quarterback, right? He's a generational talent, and they've loaded up on weapons. Man, the weapons they have: Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze and DJ Moore, and they went out and got Swift, and they got Cole Kmet, and oh my God, the weapons. And it's like we operate fantasy football world. Yeah. And then you got Jim Harbaugh, who comes into an organization, strips it of its wide receivers. Ladd McConkey is their best wide receiver, right? Like a guy named Ladd is their best player at the wide receiver position. And ultimately, Jim Harbaugh goes, no, we're going to build the team from the inside out, from front to back. That's how you build a football team. We're going to run the ball. We're going to control the line of scrimmage. We're going to play stellar with our front seven, and that's what we're going to do. And lo and behold, guess what? All of a sudden, the Chargers are legit again. And all they've been doing the last several years is, winning the fantasy football, like the fantasy football outings with their quarterback throwing it all over the place and all the things they do. I just think it's hilarious how people think that football teams are built. It's stupid to me. And so, the Bears put all those weapons out there, all those weapons. They can't block a soul, but all those weapons are going to get it done. That's why I don't understand why we pay wide receivers so much money. There's a few guys that are huge difference makers, but the bottom line is it's the most overvalued position in football. 10 other guys have to do their jobs exceptionally well for a wide receiver to catch a football. And yet we're trying to pay those guys and make them the highest paid guys on our roster is just foolish to me.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, I know we were all working on the draft. I'm sure you were studying the draft last year. Everybody kept putting skill player at the Chargers. And what did Harbaugh do? He drafted the best tackle in the draft out of Notre Dame. He gets Joe Alt. He just said, you guys can talk about all these wide receivers you want.
I'll take
I'm about to
McCarthy
take the best left
round.
tackle in the draft is what I'm about to do.
Yeah, by the way, too, he called him, hey, he is a weapon. He's an offensive player. He goes,
he's
the tip of the spear.
There he is.
I love, hey, he's a quirky dude, but I love him, and I love his football philosophy. And, it's one thing that will never go in and out of vogue or, it'll never get old. When you dominate the line of scrimmage on both lines of scrimmage, guess what? You win football games.
Yeah.
That's it. And, even Micah Parsons said, we got to control. We've got to, like Jerry Jones, we need more help on the defensive line. We need more help in front seven. And, and I mean, the bottom line is you don't win the line of scrimmage in the NFL. You don't win. That's just a fact.
Love it, Mark. Have a great week, and we'll catch up with you next Tuesday night.
Sounds good, guys. Be well.